Thanks so much, everyone, for being here for our Protect Your Shore webinar. And if you're watching this another time at home from our recording, thanks for finding this recording on our website. My name is Lindsay Taylor. I'm a conservation specialist at Lake County Soil and Water Conservation District. And I'm here with
Hi, I'm Tara Solom. I'm the district manager and I'm also the watershed planner for our office. Thank you for being here. This presentation is brought to you by Lake County Soil and Water Conservation District, and funding was provided by the Clean Water Fund from the Clean Water Land and Legacy Amendment um, that focuses on clean water restoration and ensuring that our waters and lands in Minnesota stay healthy. Continue
Thanks,
next
Sarah.
slide.
One moment. There we go.
Just
You want to take this? Go ahead.
Yeah, just a quick summary of who we are if you're not aware. Lake County Soil and Water Conservation District is located in Two Harbors, Minnesota. Our address is 408 First Avenue, which is between downtown and the Lighthouse Point Road, if you're familiar with that. Each county in Minnesota has a soil water conservation district, and there's a few counties, such as St. Louis has two, dividing by larger sections of area. Ours was founded in the 1965, but a lot of soil water conservation districts were developed during the Dust Bowl era to help with soil conservation, erosion, and all of the concerns that we were experiencing at that time. Our mission is to support the people of Lake County in protecting and conserving land and waters. We provide professional consultation, education, and resources, and those items are free to service. Next slide. Just to give you a feel for a soil water conservation district, if you recall on your ballots, there is an election and there's 5 elected board of supervisors that are divided by sections within the county. We have 5 of those that make the ultimate decisions for soil water conservation districts and the work that we provide. Our supervisors are David Abaz in District 1, Doug Landy, District 2, Beth Hipperts in District 3, Barbara Marzuz in District 4, and Doug Haas is in District 5. At any time you want to talk to one of your representatives about your concerns, you feel free. And also, we're here at any time to answer questions and provide site visits and consultation. We have 6 full-time staff, myself and Lindsay, as we described. Jenna Kaiser is a forester that we have on staff. Liz Anderson is aquatic invasive species and northern water quality coordinator. We do have a remote office in Ely that is not in Lake County, but is right on the border. So she provides a lot of services for us up in the northern part of our county. Nate Quadhammer is a conservation specialist. He focuses on forestry and terrestrial invasive species. And Kari Hadeen is our community conservationist, and she works with wetlands, cost share funding, which I'll talk about more later, site visits. She does a wide variety of different things as well. Next slide. And I should point out that in the summer, we also have 3 to 4 watercraft inspectors for aquatic invasive species inspections. And then we also have a coordinator for our administrator that we contract with. So we have additional staff as well. As I mentioned, our mission is to assist Lake County landowners and residents with anything related to conservation and natural resources. What we do is we provide technical guidance for landowners, and that's through site visits. And those, any questions at any time related to natural resources or conservation, feel free to call our office and we can direct you to the right person, or it might be us and we can provide you some resources or answers to any questions that you have. A lot of the projects that we work on look at water quality and habitat and make sure that we're restoring and protecting our land and water. Forestry is a big one with spruce budworm damage that we've been experiencing with dead and dying spruce and balsam. We have 2 foresters on staff who assist with that. Education, as we're doing today, any education needs that you have, let us know, and we can gather materials and do workshops on that and such. Stormwater planning for larger entities such as cities, but also on your property, looking at where the water flows on your property, helping you design different ways to capture and infiltrate, utilize that stormwater. And green infrastructure is using plants and other natural materials to absorb that stormwater before it gets into the gray infrastructure, which is typically pipes, stormwater drains. The picture that you see here is a cost share project that we installed in two harbors at Lake Superior Dental. This is called a vegetative swale. It's where the stormwater is running through. This is when it was newly planted. It looks a lot better now. It fills in pretty quickly, but it's just native deep-rooted vegetation that's utilizing that stormwater prior to discharge into a stormwater basin. Invasive species, both aquatic and terrestrial. You might be familiar with buckthorn, um, Japanese barberry, different things like that. We can assist with how to get rid of those and eradicate invasive species. And then we also do a collaboration with local, state, and federal agencies. We've done a lot of fish passage and bigger culvert replacement projects for trout, stream bank restoration to improve sediment, getting into streams and lakes and other pollutants, habitat improvements, and then we work with our local county highway, township, and cities within Lake County. Next slide. Additional resources that you can find on our website. We have had other workshops and they're recorded and stored on our website. If you have a Lake Superior coastal property and you have concerns, questions about erosion and other things that are experiencing, we had a specific workshop in the past through a grant that we obtained for Lake Superior shoreline. And so feel free to take a look at that. There's also numerous materials to talk about different ways to protect your shoreline, moving from vegetation to riprap and others. We would prefer to keep down on the spectrum of that green infrastructure, natural, native shoreline, which we'll talk about today, but we can answer questions about pros and cons of all of that. And there's a lot of materials that we developed from that workshop and that grant that we had in the past. There's also a stormwater workshop on there, forestry, wetlands. If you have a septic system, there was a really well done recorded workshop on that, and it also talked about well safety and what to test for and how to keep your well water safe. Next slide. Additional resources that we have cost share funding that the state of Minnesota um, gives us to utilize and share with landowners. And then we also have other pots of various funding. I don't know if I've mentioned, but we are completely grant funded. So we write a lot of federal, state. We get a little bit of county money. We are not county, but they contribute a little bit to each soil and water conservation district. So we have various pots of money that we utilize and share with different resource concerns. And one resource that we have is cost share funding, and this is to assist in installing conservation practices that improve water quality and control that soil erosion. And through keeping ecosystems healthy, we can pay for up to 75% of the cost of those projects. For example, you could have a project that contains native vegetation, shoreline and stream buffers, those green stormwater practices, like I shared that picture of that vegetative swale or rain gardens. We do have a small fund for well sealing, $500 per well. We would contribute to sealing. Forest health, we have two foresters on staff, like I mentioned. There are different cost share funding through DNR and the federal NRCS program that helps remove those dead and dying balsam and pays for a portion of that work. Woodland stewardship plans are written, and we can cost share the writing of those as well, which is a planning document to determine how to keep your forest healthy on your property. Tree planting, And there is a small pot of money available for county environmental services to assist with septic systems. And I think that's mainly based on income requirements, but it is something that you could look into. Next slide. This is a really interesting white paper if you have not seen this. It was released in 2023 and it was titled Minnesota's Vanishing Natural Shorelines, a Loss That Contributes to Degraded Lake Quality. And it showed that if you keep your shoreline 75% or more vegetated, unmowed with natural vegetation, that equates to clean water. And they were looking at a watershed scale. So if you look at a watershed, which is just an area that all of the water that drops on that piece of land would all flow to the same spot. So if you're looking at a watershed level, if 75% of that is vegetated with trees and natural vegetation, then that equates to clean water, they found. So that threshold is that 75-25%. So just something to keep in mind as we're going through this of why it's important, what you can do, and also we want to keep that threshold of 75% as a possibility to consider. Next slide. This didn't show as clear, but this was also from that report as well. It's just a graphic showing on the right, you can see a cleared lakeshore without any native vegetation along as a buffer. You can see that runoff volume is increased by 5 times. Phosphorus is something that contributes to algae bloom. So if you want to keep your lake healthy and not have a lot of algae, we need to keep that phosphorus out. And not having a natural native shoreline buffer contributes to 7 to 9 times more phosphorus being inputted into a lake, and also 18 times more sediment enters. So just something else to consider. Next slide. And I'll toss it to you, Lindsay. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Tara. So, what is a natural shoreline? That's what you're all here to learn today. So, a natural shoreline could be developed or completely undeveloped, but it needs to have a substantial area of trees, shrubs, natural ground cover, and an aquatic zone with limited alteration and a lot of good intact plant stands, woody habitat, all of these things that are going to be good for your lake's wildlife. So some of the benefits of a natural shoreline, one, it holds and filters runoff. So like Tara was mentioning, all of those native plants have much deeper roots than the non-native plants, and especially turf grass that are on some shorelines. And so those native plants are able to hold and filter runoff coming from the rest of your property before it goes into your lake, which helps filter it and clean it on its way too. It stabilizes lake shores and riverbanks, which means less sediment going into your lake and your river, and ultimately all these bigger watersheds. And then reducing erosion is part of the way that it is reducing that sediment load entering the water. And some other things, it provides habitat for fish and wildlife. So if you like to fish on your lake, having a natural shoreline is a huge benefit. I have actually talked to some people who live on a lake that part of the lake is very developed, no natural shorelines. The other part of the lake is completely wild and natural still. And that landowner notices that everyone from the lake comes and fishes in front of her property because that's where the habitat for the fish are. There's also the benefit of scenic screening of your shoreline development and a privacy screening. And ultimately, over the long term, it does cost less to maintain once you get that really healthy shoreline buffer planted. So I thought we'd also just touch on the anatomy of a shoreline. So there are three main parts to a shoreline. One is the aquatic zone. So in this diagram on the right, you can see everything that's in the water is the aquatic zone, and that is part of your shoreline. You want to make sure that you're having aquatic plants and woody habitat growing in that zone too. Next is the shoreline zone, which is between where the water meets the land up to the bank, and then everything above that is the upland zone. So all three of these pieces are really important in managing your shoreline, but just to get another idea of what we're talking about when we use those terms. And Tara, at any point, if you want to jump in, please feel free. So, restoring your shore, the first step, of course, is planning. And there are a lot of resources out there to help you plan your shoreline. Our office is one of them. If you live in Lake County, Lake SWCD, we can come out, do a site visit at your property. We were doing a few this fall and earlier this summer. If you're in St. Louis or Cook County, you can connect with your local SWCD to do that. There are also some really good resources online. The Minnesota DNR has a tool called Score Your Shore, and it is an assessment that you can print out and basically give your shoreline points based on what percentage of your shoreline is covered in native plants, in trees, how much of it is completely cleared, and that gives you an idea of where your shoreline falls in this scoring process. And then Blue Thumb is an organization in Minnesota that also has a lot of resources, and they have a workbook that I've printed out and learned a lot from called the Resilient Shorelines Planning Workbook. And it essentially will walk you through most of these steps that we're talking about today. So I highly recommend checking that out. It's just a free resource on their website. And any of these resources that I'm sharing here today, I'll be sending out an email so that you'll get these links too. So as part of your planning, an important thing to keep in mind is something that's called the ordinary high water level, or you'll see it abbreviated as the OHWL. And this point on your shoreline is just the highest water level that has been maintained long enough to leave a mark. So it doesn't necessarily mean wherever your water is right now, but when you see those stains on the rocks or there's no vegetation growing up to that point, that's your ordinary high water level. And it's important because there are certain things that you can and can't do above and below that level. And if you want help figuring out where it is, that'd be something that you would talk to the DNR about. They can have a hydrologist come out and talk to you about where that line is. Because there are a lot of things to consider when you are looking at fixing or adapting your shoreline through different regulations and permits. So there's local government, cities, counties, your townships, watershed districts, the Minnesota DNR, and then the Soil and Water Conservation Districts are another entity that are there to help you understand some of these different things. So here's an example of that ordinary high water level. So you can see on this diagram, we've got the record low marked down on the bottom, kind of an average water level. You've got some vegetation happening on the hillside, and then that ordinary high water level is going to be somewhere between your average, but not the record high water level. So that's an important distinction too. And Blue Thumb has this really helpful graphic that helps you understand who you should be talking to if you want to do different things. So, for example, if you want to use herbicides anywhere near the water, you would be talking to Minnesota DNR Fisheries Department. If you want to be planting or removing vegetation below that ordinary high water level, that would also be talking to the DNR. They have an aquatic plant management program. Altering the land below that level would be the area hydrologists. Like I mentioned, they're the ones that can come out and help you figure out where that line is on your shoreline. And then if you're altering the land above it, that would be local units of government. So again, like I mentioned, the SWCD can help you understand what regulations there are for moving dirt or regrading anything above your water line. So then you get to move into planning. After you've assessed your shoreline, you can move into planning. And one of the first things that you can do or have a partner like Lake SWCD help with is create a site sketch. So this does not need to be a scientific fancy sketch. This is just a really simple way to visualize what your shoreline and property looks like now and help you see where you'd like to make changes. Because the other cool thing about planning something like a shoreline restoration is you don't have to do it all at once. And there are a lot of different ways that you can improve your shoreline without doing it all at once too. So you'll see this example just has some of the different plants marked out. We've got a garden, some turf grass lawn, some of the soil types are marked out. And as I said, this is also something that your soil and water district can help you create. Oh, went too far. So as you're designing your shoreline restoration, there are two different project types to consider. So one is a native buffer planting, so just planting a native buffer strip along your shoreline. Another thing to consider is a full shoreline restoration, or maybe you need to be doing some earth moving or regrading of the slope, depending on if you've had erosion at your site. So some general advice is knowing your plant zones, what plants will live and thrive at this location, using a diversity of grasses, flowers, and shrubs. Also considering plant heights. Is your cabin or house at the water level? And so you don't want to be planting, 6 foot tall flowers because some of them can grow that tall, or maybe you don't want to line your entire shoreline with trees because you want to see the water. Those are all things that you can work into your shoreline plan to make sure that it works for you and your lifestyle on your shoreline too. And then using borders too, just to help keep your planting neat. So something we also wanted to mention is in Lake County, we do have a buffer ordinance. And as I mentioned, this is something that we can help with. And so the buffer ordinance in Lake County says that the landowner must establish and maintain a buffer area of, on average, 50 feet along the shoreline and 30-foot minimum. And what that 50-foot average width means is, you might have an area where you want to have a picnic table down by the water or access to get to a dock. And so there's not going to be much of a buffer in that area because you're going to need to get through your planting and your native shoreline to get down to your dock. And so there are maybe other areas of your property where that buffer is going to be much wider if you have trees going up the side of your property and shrubs. And so that's where that average comes into play. So after you've designed your shoreline plan, you move into installation. And so the first thing that you'd be wanting to do is removing sod. So here's a picture of a shoreline that is not very good for the water quality of the lake or the wildlife living in and around it. It's just a lot of sod shoreline. And there is a balance to be struck if you want to have a little bit of grass at your property. That's where that buffer balance comes in. But there are a few different ways you can remove sod, and there's a lot of details, more details about this in Blue Thumb's guidance. But you could, depending on how large it is, hand dig it out or get a sod cutting machine. You could be mulching it with cardboard or covering it in either clear or opaque plastic for a certain amount of time that basically just allows all of that vegetation to die underneath the plastic, and then you're ready to do your planting either later in the year or the following year. So just some of the steps that come into play when you're restoring your shoreline. When you're preparing your site, you want to be turning and loosening that compacted soil. Installing mulch or weed suppression material can help prevent weeds from sprouting in the soil. Weeding is one of the biggest forms of maintenance that the planting needs, and so anything you can do at this step to prevent those weeds from coming up is helpful. And then if you have a flat property, double shredded hardwood mulch doesn't float the way that wood chips do, so that can be a better option. And for the sloped shoreline, you could use biodegradable erosion control blankets around your planting if you're trying to keep all of that sediment from washing down after you've planted. So then you get to the fun part. You get to plant. You can seed or you can get plugs. Plugs will, you'll see a little bit more progress, a little bit faster, or you can also do a mix of both. So a good way to do it is laying out the plugs to see your spacing, making sure that the roots aren't in a spiral before you put them in the ground, and then just putting them in the soil. So you can see an example of a planting along a shoreline in this photo with some straw in between the planting just to keep all that soil in place. And then we talked about maintenance. So for the first few years, those are really critical years for a successful project. So eventually you will have less maintenance, less time and cost compared to other methods of shoreline restoration. But in the beginning, you really want to make sure that you stay ahead of any invasive species that might move in or other weeds, and stay on top of weeding and maintaining that planting so that your native plants can continue to grow successfully to their full size. So that involves, like we mentioned, weeding, watering. There might be shoreline specific maintenance, like watching erosion control structures that have been put into place or managing fencing and exclosures. So here's an example. I believe this was from Blue Thumb's website also, just of what a natural shoreline can look like after installed. So you can see also a lot of geese on that left-hand side, a lot of turf grass, and on the right they do still have some turf grass and a yard, but this is still a huge step better than what it was before because of all of these native plants. And you don't even have to be a botanist to tell that there are a lot of different plants in that native planting just by looking at the different colors of the leaves, the different colors of the flowers, the heights of the plants. You can see that there's a lot of biodiversity in that shoreline planting. So something else we're really excited to share is this program known as the Lake Steward Program. So I'm not sure if anyone has heard of Minnesota Lakes and Rivers. They are a nonprofit based out of the cities, but they serve the entire state and they have a lot of amazing work. And one of their programs is called this Lake Steward Program. And basically, if you have a healthy shoreline, they partner with lake associations across the state to get you one of these signs to put out on your property, either off the end of your dock or on the edge of your shoreline. And this is signaling to all of the rest of your neighbors on your lake that you are a lake steward. And guess what? It makes other people want to be lake stewards too. So this is a really amazing program. It's a really impactful program. There are many, many lake stewards. I wish I knew exactly how many across the state. These are all is a map of all the organizations that are partnered with the Lake Steward program. Previously, Minnesota Lakes and Rivers has just been working through lake associations. And in Lake County, we do have a lot of shoreline owners, but we don't have a lake association in Lake County. And so when I was talking with Minnesota Lakes and Rivers recently, we were trying to figure out how we could partner on this program. And in Lake County, Lake SWCD is going to be the partner that can evaluate your shoreline and help you get one of these lake steward signs to recognize your effort protecting your shoreline and what that's doing for our water quality. So we are really excited to be bringing this Lake Steward program to Lake County in the coming year. And if you have any questions or you want to learn more or you're interested in having your shoreline evaluated to be part of this program, please don't hesitate to reach out. So here's just a little snapshot of some of the people who have gotten their Lake Steward signs. They have a lot more photos on their website. Minnesota Lakes and Rivers Association is another great website with a lot of resources about shoreline restoration. Now I'll pass it back to Tara.
Okay, I also have some resources that I will show online and kind of show you where to find it. Um, but final considerations are if you're developing a site or if you are considering building or changing things, just make sure that you always assess what vegetation and trees you have on your site because removing a tree will take many, many years, 20, 30 years to regrow to the same size and create the same benefits as what you had before. So really assess what trees and vegetation you remove when you're doing development or projects on your property. Just try to keep what you have because trying to restore that takes a lot of time and energy. Another consideration is that if you are developing or doing work on your property and you disturb more than an acre of land, that is required to have a construction stormwater permit and also a stormwater pollution reduction plan. And there's a lot of things that go with that. So if you're doing any work on your property, keep that in mind. It's really important to, as Lindsay talked about, making a plan, determine where you're going to be doing your planting, where you're going to be doing your restoration, planning that out before you get to work so that it just saves time and energy on knowing what your plans are, digging into what type of plants you want to have, making sure that they're deep-rooted, vegetated, through a native plant garden facility, ideally, because like Menards and different places like that might have perennial vegetation, but a lot of times they're hybrids and they don't provide the benefits that this real native vegetated plants can provide. And then another component is engineering. If you're disturbing soil, or if you're making a swale, or if you're changing things up as far as the slope, make sure that you have the permits that Lindsay talked about, and I'll also recap on that, but also that the engineering plans and you have a trusted engineer to know that they're doing the right work. Um, and that it's also designed, like I mentioned, before you do any work. Make sure that you have your ducks in a row. And our office, like I said, can help you do the planning. We actually have engineers that assist our office, and we can connect you with them, and it's a lower cost. And a lot of times they'll make those design and engineering plans uh, for free if you work through our office, and then you would bring that to a contractor and have kind of a small bidding process to see who seems like they're the most qualified or could follow the plan that our engineers put together. Once again, engineering is typically when you're moving dirt or sloping or different things, so that's more of like a rain garden situation or a vegetative swale, but we do have those abilities in-house as well. Stormwater runoff. A lot of times we do site visits on properties that are experiencing erosion, and a lot of it is from wave action and different things related to the water erosion. But sometimes it's just as much as the stormwater runoff coming off the roof of your buildings, off your properties. So really just when it rains outside, take a look at your property and see where all of the stormwater is running off to. And then we can address it through those vegetative swales, possibly rain gardens, possibly just a native plant garden that you could utilize to absorb some of that storm water. Also look at your rain gutters and also install rain barrels to collect that water coming off your property. Wetlands in Minnesota are protected. There's a no net loss, so we don't want to impact wetlands. We don't want to fill, remove, or any of those things. So also make sure if you have wetlands on your property that you're in compliance with those regulations. Kari, one of our staff that I mentioned in the beginning, is our representative on the wetland panel. Each county has one. And so she can look at your property and help. She's not going to delineate, meaning like that's high level. If you're going to develop a property, you need a delineation, but she can give you some type of feel of where the wetlands could be potentially and where you'd want to avoid doing any work. Lindsay also talked about local zoning ordinances. Um, Permitting is also a component of that, like she mentioned, that ordinary high level water level, DNR public waters permits are required if you're working under that OHW. County has a grade and fill permit if you're doing any land movement, um, soil movement, I mean, and there's others. So come to us if you have questions about any of this, and we have people on staff that can assist. I thought it would be really beneficial could you stop, or I guess we can keep it on. And then I will just share a few resources that are online real quick. So if you want to get to our website and get more information, um, I wanted to show you where those recordings are. Are you able to see my screen still, Lindsay? The Lake County website?
Sorry, I didn't realize I was muted. I'm sharing the presentation still, but if you'd like, I can stop sharing and then you could start a share.
Okay, that'd be great.
Oh, there we go. I can see it now.
Okay. So there's about us. It has a lot of information. Also, you can go down to the workshops, and all the workshops that I mentioned are here at the bottom. There's a septic system workshop, the coastal erosion that I mentioned on Lake Superior that we did, wetlands, forestry, stormwater. Um, More information about watersheds and what they are could be here. We also have some information about, we have an annual tree sale. If you're interested in contacting us in February, that goes live, and we do low cost tree seedlings for people to purchase. There's a lot of information on our website, and you could just Google Lake County Soil and Water Conservation District or Lake County. We're a department located under that. Next, I'm going to stop share. I think I have to do that for each switch of website. Lindsay mentioned the Score Your Shore from DNR to kind of assess how you're doing on your natural shoreline work. There's a manual that talks about all the different components related to what Lindsay talked about. If you wanted more information about those different aquatic zones, different concepts within that. Um, and then did it switch over to the quick guide when I
Yep.
switched it? Okay. And you could score your own shore. That's within this website here at Score Your Shore. It was back here. Once again, this is a DNR tool. There's the manual that I just showed you and the quick guide. The quick guide is how you can kind of assess. It talks about each of those zones. And then you get points based on how many trees, shrubs, cover, different things. And then it might also give you a clue on what you could improve on. Like, oh, I only have, 25% of my shoreline ground cover is not just turf grass. So you can increase it that way. Next, is it moving over to Plant Finder?
Yep.
Okay. This is the Blue Thumb website that Lindsay mentioned. This is a really good tool. You can come here and you can start planning what kind of tree or what kind of plants you want to start planting. These are all the native plants that they would have. Map of eco regions. We are in northern lakes and forests. So you could go back there and say, I'm planting in Minnesota lakes and forests. It's a shaded area. It's a pretty dry soil. Forbs, which is flowers. I want a flower. And you could even talk about what color you want it to be. So then you would click find plants, and then it will give you all of those type of plants with pictures based on soil types, regions, whether you want it to be flowering or whatnot. And these are all the native options. So this is a good Blue Thumb plant finder would be another resource that you could reference. If you're wondering about your watershed health, the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency assesses every 10 years each of these watersheds in Minnesota, which is a lot, and there's 81 of them. The ones that we have in Lake County are Lake Superior South, Lake Superior North, Cloquet, headwaters, a little bit of St. Louis River, Rainy River. So each of these watersheds are assessed every 10 years, and the assessment includes 2 years of intensive water quality monitoring on selected lakes and rivers in Minnesota. And all of that data is collected on the water quality assessment. You can review by lakes and by a lot of different regions what your water quality looks like. And so they have the data, they have maps. They talk about clarity levels, all of those things. So if you want more information on your specific lake, your specific area, stream, feel free to go to that website. And once again, that's the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. And talk some more. I also wanted to highlight that riprap is pretty common for erosion control along lakes. And that's what we want to try to avoid if possible. One natural solution that we've found works really well are coir logs. And you can see there's videos of how to install it and stuff. It's a biodegradable cylinder made of coconut fibers or different materials that are natural. And so they are staked to the shoreline. It absorbs a lot of that wave energy, prevents erosion, and then you can also keep it in place and then plant above. And so that's one natural solution that you can use for that. So just a scattering of different resources that you could utilize.
Thanks, Tara. That was awesome. And our last slide was just asking for any questions or comments so we can open it up if anyone has any other questions. Feel free to use the chat or unmute. So Amy asked, is the PCA site assessment similar to Lake Finder?
Yes, it might be the same thing. I'm not too familiar with Lake Finder. I don't know who hosts that if you do, Amy. Um, but it probably uses a lot of the same data because I know Department of Natural Resources also does some sampling, but I think MPCA is where it's all housed. So I would say yes, it's probably pretty similar. And yes, there's a soil water conservation district in Aiken County. Um, they have a really great staff there. Oh, Lindsay, I see that you answered that. And then I see that we have Jake Bendel from North St. Louis Soil and Water. So if you're in the Virginia area, North St. Louis area, he would be your point of contact as well.
Any other questions? Jake, do you have a question or comment?
No, I just good work. Thanks for the evening entertainment.
Thanks for joining. Well, if anyone doesn't have other questions, we can wrap up, but you know where to find us. You can find our contact info just by Googling Lake County SWCD. You'll get to our website with all of our contact info. Please feel free to reach out. And if you're watching this and you aren't sure who your SWCD is, you can contact us and we will figure out where to send you to get in contact with a shoreline specialist. Thanks so much for coming.